Week 18, I'm Dan Titus. That's Justin Henry. Let's get to the points. So we wanted to do something different, switch it up. We want to get a mailbag. So we wanted to get to some of your questions and some of your feedback that you might have as you're approaching these fantasy playoffs, because it's right around the corner. And we also got the trade deadline, so you might have to make some moves. So Jay, you ready to get in some mailbag questions from the viewers out there?
Yeah, it's good to switch it up, and it's crunch time right now. So roles are changing for players. These schedules get a little bit tired. Playoffs are coming for you, and there's different weeks. So I'm glad we'll get to answer some questions. And if you guys got more, hit us up.
For sure. So our first question comes from Matt. He wants to know thoughts on Cam Johnson or PJ Washington the rest of the season. Let's start with Cam Johnson. What are your thoughts on Cam the rest of the way?
You know, Cam Johnson, he kind of has a role already, and he has throughout his entire career. A little bit of a less performance this year, but with Cam Thomas dealing with an ankle injury, Spencer Dinwiddie's out of there now, you might be wondering if there's an elevated role for Cam Johnson, who just entered the starting lineup. To me, I don't see it. I think we're going to see similar numbers to what he's always produced, around that 13, 15-point range. He's got some good efficiency, some decent defensive stats. So if you're expecting anything out of body from Cam Johnson, I don't really see it. I think whatever you had him at before, keep him there.
Yeah, I'd love to see him win, but I just don't see it happening in this current situation, man. He's definitely a drop for me in 10-team leagues. He's a drop for me in points leagues because his volume just isn't there. His scoring is down, his minutes are down, and this Brooklyn Nets team is going nowhere fast. So, I just feel like at this point, with the production not really holding to what we're used to, the efficiency is down, I just don't see a room where you can keep Cam Johnson in shallow formats, and he's probably a fringe 12-team guy right now. What are your thoughts on PJ Washington now that he's in Dallas?
Yeah, with the trade over to Dallas, I think there was some expectation, like maybe he could continue his role or we could see a similar type of production. I just don't see it. With the scoring output that he was able to have in Charlotte, a little bit more freedom to drop a 20-point game or even a 40-point game like he had last month. We're not going to see that now with Luka and Kyrie running the show in Dallas. So if you were in on PJ Washington before, I think this is the time to be out on PJ Washington now.
Yeah, I'm out. I'm out with you, man. He's only averaging 8 points and 5 boards since becoming a member of the Dallas Mavericks. The Mavericks are getting healthy, and that efficiency hasn't been there for him. He's barely hitting a 3 a game. He still is getting some steals, but I don't know. It's not enough to hold value to me in points or category leagues. You know, I'm talking 10 or 12 teams. So, yeah, he's safely a drop for me. Let's go to a couple of random guys. So might have lucked into some opportunity, maybe not. What are your thoughts on Alex Pokusevski joining the Charlotte Hornets? Is he an ad?
You know, I had a lot of love for Poku and his versatility when he was in OKC back when they were in the gutter. But now, no, this ain't a pickup. This isn't a player that I want. He has to earn minutes on a brand new team. He couldn't even earn minutes on the Thunder. So I'm out on Poku, man.
Yeah, I think this is a deep league ad here. I mean, it seems like Charlotte keeps on trying to pick up all of the Thunder's, trash and whatever. But yeah, no, I don't see room that he's actually going to get significant minutes enough that's going to matter, at least in like 10 to 12 team formats. And what about Kobe Buffkin? This is a guy that was actually a pretty high draft pick for the Atlanta Hawks. Hasn't had a chance to really get any shine because the guards there are so good. But now that Trey's going to be missing 4 weeks, is there a spot for him in this rotation now? We know how good those Hawks have been from a fantasy perspective all year.
I think this is, he's getting 20 minutes in a game, and you love to see that on this Hawks team, which is fast paced and produces fantasy all-stars like we've talked about in the past. But I think unless you're in a category league and you absolutely need assists in order to dominate your category, this is a player that's probably more of a wait and see. He does have a role though, so if he happens to stick, this is a player that will be picked up, but I think he's still more of a wait and see right now, unless you're in like a much deeper league.
Yeah, to me, it's a watch list. I think his minutes are going to creep up into 20 minutes. He got 20 minutes on Tuesday night. So there's definitely a good chance that he could see some more opportunities in this rotation, but not someone that I'm actively adding right now, unless you're in like, we're talking like 14 plus teams here. So definitely not someone that you're going to be looking at in the short term. And shouts to Proper Shells for that question. Really good one. This is an interesting one from Mike. I'm in 6th place and my playoffs start in week 21. Any teams or players that I should be concerned about? I'm playing in a 12-team, 9-cat league. That's an interesting one. Let me take that one for a second. So it's kind of loaded. Like, I don't know what your roster construction is. I don't know what players you even have on your team. But just knowing that your playoffs start in week 21, 2 teams that I would be concerned about rostering are the Dallas Mavericks and the Charlotte Hornets. Both of those two teams played 2 games in that week. And normally, like if you're depending on when your playoffs start, they're actually pretty well distributed, the games played, but that's a huge schedule disadvantage in week 21. So if you're in the 6th spot or 5th, you're gonna have to play that first round, and you got to have your guys playing. So am I saying sell Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving? No. But those fringe mid-tier guys like Brandon Miller, Trey Mann, I could be looking to move those assets, maybe sell high at a point to probably get someone that can maybe get you 3 or 4 games in week 6, or excuse me, in week 21, so that you can have more games for your squad there.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic because you have the talented players who anchor your team. So Kyrie Irving has probably been somebody you've been counting on when he's been on the floor to help you win games. But if they're only available for 2 games, you might get similar type of numbers volume-wise out of a player that has 4 games that week. So definitely be on the lookout for anybody that, if you can trade and get very similar value but have more games, that's a win in my opinion.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Oh, we had a return last night. CP3 is back in the lineup for the Warriors. And my man, what's his name here? Let's see. My man Jay here wants to know, is Chris Paul a top 100 player for the rest of the season? What you got?
Well, Chris Paul wasn't really a top 100 player when he was playing initially before he got hurt. So to me, I don't think he has a return to the top 100. And this Warriors team is playing really good basketball right now. They're getting all their guys nice and steady in their roles. I think Chris Paul is outside of the top 100 the rest of the way.
We finally differ. I'm all Chris Paul, man. Like anytime a guy that can get you 6 assists off the bench with a steal and potentially a 3, he's going to be hovering around that top 100 status. And I think for the season right now on a per game basis, Chris Paul's 85. So I don't expect him to be much worse than what he is already. The question I would have is, like, it seems like Steve Kerr is keeping Klay Thompson on the bench. What does this do to Brandon Pajemski? Do those minutes fluctuate? Will Chris Paul close? Because normally we're expecting Chris Paul to be like a 25-minute guy. Maybe he goes more to 20. Then I could see that being on the back end of that, top 100 status. But I don't know, man. I'm trusting in Chris Paul, man. It's the point guard. He can at least get me some steals and some assists, enough to hold that value.
That's that Bay Area love for you right there.
Coming from the 49ers guy, I get it. Let's go to the next one. We got Bryant has the question. Who are the best players that are drop candidates ahead of the playoffs? I'm assuming he means what are the most notable names that are potentially drop candidates before the playoffs? So this is kind of a difficult question to answer, but I'll let you take the first shot at that.
Yeah, there's one name that obviously has been a fantasy superstar all season, Trae Young. Being out 4 weeks, especially if your playoffs are in the normal Yahoo default playoff weeks, Trae Young is going to be out for 4 weeks. And even if he comes back, you got to anticipate there's either potential minutes restriction. He might miss any back-to-back games. You're talking about the very last week of fantasy playoffs, and you can have an IR spot and put him in your IL spot, and that's fine. But this is a player, if you have to waste a bench spot for Trae Young, it's time to go. It's time to get rid of. You got to cut the fat and win your championship.
Yeah, I'll go one step further. I would add Desmond Bane to that list. I'd add Joel Embiid to that list. Marcus Smart, Julius Randle. All of these guys, to me, are projected to be a mid to late March, return point. And if we're talking about people coming off these injuries, right, in Memphis' situation, they're not in a position to contend for a playoff spot. So why are those guys going to come back and play heavy minutes? Joel Embiid has already been rumored to come back at the end of the month. And then, the Knicks have a lot of depth now in that front court that I don't think that they need to bring back Julius Randle to begin getting 35 minutes a night out the gate. So I don't know. I have concerns about all of those guys. And to be honest, I'd probably be moving on. If you have an IL spot, hold them. But you may need those IL spots as you get closer to the playoffs for players that actually might be able to contribute for you, not playing this guessing game of wondering if you're going to get your superstar back.
100%.
This is a good one. This is from my man, Crypto something, but B-Ball for Life or 92. I'm assuming you were born in 92. I could be making a guess. That's a good year for basketball, dream team and all that. He wants to know best sleeper center going forward. Interesting question. What you got, Jay?
Yeah, I think at center, this is a position that like it's kind of top heavy. It feels like the elite guys are elite, and there's not a whole lot there behind them. But one guy that you've talked about, and we've talked about here on the show, that's still hovering around 50% owned is Marvin Bagley, who has a decent playoff schedule there with 11 games. This is a guy that's been averaging 13 and 10 over his last 6 games, getting a steal and a block in those games too. And we see what's happening right now in Washington. Their guys that they signed to be big time players haven't been. And so once they've gotten him from after the trade, Bagley's been playing really well. So Marvin Bagley's a player. I think if he's out there somehow in your league, or if you're in a much thinner league, go ahead and pick him up.
Yeah, he was like one of my top waiver pickups this week, man. He was at 50%. So that's still half the leagues out there don't have Marvin Bagley rostered. What are you doing? Get him on your team. I don't care how small or big the league is. Make sure you scoop up Marvin Bagley. My thought to that was, we talked a little bit about it last week with like shutdown candidates, and now DeAndre Ayton got hurt last night, hurt his hand, x-rays were negative. He's going to get more testing done. But I think that this actually might open up a spot for Duop Reith, a guy that is in 11 starts this year, has averaged 12.7 boards. He can stretch the floor, hit threes, and he also gets blocks. So that's a guy that I'd be looking at, like that's kind of deep out there. He's under 20% roster that might actually have some fantasy value down the stretch.
Yeah, I always look at those block guys too. And he's a guy who can probably get you a block and a half, almost 2 blocks a game if he gets the right minutes. So Reef, man, that's a sneaky pickup right there.
Yeah, no, I had to dig in the trenches a little bit. Shouts to my man Octavio. He's got a question. Do we hold on to either Daniel Gafford or Derek Lively? I feel like this is a very common question, man. And I'll take a stab at that. I don't think you need to hold either of them. At this point, we're just talking about the blocks. If you need blocks, I would say hold on to both of them. If you don't want blocks, then I don't think you need either of them because they're going to cannibalize each other. And you also have the other added element of when the Mavericks play small, you're going to see Maxi Kleber out there. So that's just way too much churn for the front court for me to be like, I can confidently hold Derek Lively or Daniel Gafford in 12-team formats or even 10-team formats at that.
Yeah, to me, Gafford was like in Washington, he's getting minutes. Now that was a real life move. Getting Gafford gives them really good bench depth. The Mavs needed it going into this playoff run. So both of these guys are probably going to tear. We talked about this with Mason Plumlee and Daniel Titus when Zubac was out. It's like they kind of cannibalize each other minutes wise. One day they'll start, the next one, the other guy will get more minutes. So I'd probably stay away from it, just like you said.
Yeah, I think that's a great call. And yeah, I think that, actually, do we have one more? Oh, we got one more. Go to my man Paul Reed in Philly. Mike B's got another question. What are you doing with Paul Reed? You trying to sell him? You want to keep him? What do you think his rest of the season outlook is?
I think it depends on the makeup of your team. If your team has been relying on Paul Reed in the absence of Joel Embiid, then you probably either need to keep him or trade him at similar value because Joel Embiid's not expected to be back until late March. So when you look at that timeline, you look at how Paul Reed's been playing, he hasn't really, he came out the gates really hot and he's slowed down since. I think that's about what we can expect moving forward from Paul Reed. So just depending on how your team needs to utilize Paul Reed, that's about, I keep his value where it is right now. And I think we can see that through the rest of the fantasy season.
Yeah, he's been pretty volatile. I think I would try to sell him if he has another good game, just because I don't want to deal with that volatility as we get to the playoffs, right? Like you can have a 13-10 game with 2 blocks and then you have 0 points and 4 rebounds. So like having to deal with that is just very frustrating. So if you can get him for someone that has a higher floor or a safer floor, I think you might want to do that if you have the depth to compensate for it. All right, that'll do it for the mailbag. Thanks y'all for submitting all your questions. And as Jay said in the top, make sure you still hit us up on Twitter. We'll be happy to answer them as we get to these fantasy playoffs. Remember that the trade deadline is next Thursday, March 7th. So make sure that you get all the trades in by then. That is the Yahoo default. Until then, we'll see you next week on Get to the Points. Peace.